If there's one thing I can say about documentaries in general, they really, if they're done right, can do a fantastic job at the look of whatever they're portraying or whatever they're talking about. And so here we have a documentary about David Bowie, and I really wanted to see it, so let's talk about that. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Movie Emporium's documentary review of Moonage Daydream, the documentary that follows the life of David Bowie and is directed by Brett Morgen. So Moonage Daydream is a very fantastical 135-minute approach to David Bowie as an individual. We follow his career trajectory of when he was part of doing the Ziggy Stardust stuff to when he started to become doing his 80s kind of pop stuff to his very much metal stuff he did in the 90s and 2000s, and it adds a spin of the fantastical kind of what it would be almost feeling like if you were inside the head of David Bowie, who was a very much a musician, a painter, an actor, a guy with a lot of drive that went places to that he would just get inspiration for. And what this documentary does is it adds footage from like every kind of art form you can imagine, every kind of movie in some form or fashion, but it also kind of goes into the mindset of who David Bowie was, which was a very fantastical, very enigma of an individual. And that's what this movie is, or this documentary is a look into his life about what he did and what he thought and how his approach to music making and art and stuff like that, and how he became like a cultural icon in the generations that he was alive, I guess you could say. So I'm definitely all about, a documentary, to be fairly honest, especially a documentary about David Bowie, one of my favorite musicians of all time. I was really looking forward to this when I saw the trailer for it, especially when it premiered in IMAX, and it was like very like aggressive and bombastic, especially with his musical approach and kind of what it was doing. But the fact that David Bowie died so tragically and so young. I mean, he was so close to 70, but he died, fell relatively young. It was kind of a culture shock. It's as bad as when Neil Peart died and, dealing with that situation. So I went into this really excited because it really looked like a very kind of heartfelt approach to the man that was David Bowie. And for my honest review of this movie or this documentary, it's absolutely fantastic. If you're a David Bowie fan, you should definitely watch this. If you have an IMAX theater in your area, you should definitely watch it in IMAX because it's one of the best documentaries in the IMAX, as well as being one of the most aggressive sound mixes for a movie I've ever seen in IMAX, to be fairly honest. And is a very weird, very fantastical, but very personal approach that the director Brett Morgen has done to get into the mindset of this kind of strange person that was David Bowie. We see from the very beginning when this movie starts, or this documentary starts, the kind of just chaotic nature of the 70s and who David Bowie was with the Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders of Mars and stuff like that. And then how he kind of, just went through that life just not really kind of knowing what he wanted and always trying to change his kind of trajectory in life and the places that he went. And then it kind of revolves into his more famous part of his career, which was with like the more pop sense stuff and stuff like that, and the more metal stuff that he did. And it really is a truly encompassing film that just, it takes everything and just kind of, it doesn't allow it to breathe, which is what David Bowie was known for. He was an individual that really pushed the boundaries of not only the transition between, keeping a kind of like a neutral stance when it became between like the women and men. He always dressed like very differently in his like kind of product and stuff like that. And it really shows a man who just really wanted to create. He wanted to continue to do what he loved. And maybe he alienated a lot of people that he knew. What this documentary shows is that an individual who's creative, an individual who has drive or passion, will do anything they can to keep that passion moving, and they don't stand still. I think one of the favorite moments of any celebrity I ever heard about is when I heard about Sean Diddy Combs, or Puff Daddy, or whatever you want to call him, where he talked about how he never slept because he was always wanting to create something. And that is prevalent in something like here, where David Bowie was an individual that he couldn't stand still. And it really shows, the fact that, like I said, when it starts out and like everything about the movie and the cuts and the kind of chaotic nature, it will go to something of a song that David Bowie is singing in the 70s. Then it'll cut to some like really cool like old school movies back in the classic 1900s eras, and then it'll go to like some really weird kind of creative energy, like some of the stuff he was doing as like an artist. That's what I think Brett Morgan is doing so well in this documentary, is he's kind of going with the flow of who David Bowie was, and he's kind of slowing down when he needs to slow down. He kind of stops it when he needs to stop. He kind of puts in the stuff in there that will kind of complement the stuff that David Bowie was doing and allow those things to kind of work with one another in tandem. And it's an absolutely fantastic documentary. Even if you're not a huge fan of David Bowie, you got to appreciate what Brett Morgan is doing here, because this is a very, very different, very interesting, very odd documentary that just does it in spades. And it really is, I think if I had any problems with it at all, is it's just a little too long. It's like I said, 135 minutes. And there are some like shots in here that are kind of repeated, but I think if you have, when it comes to documentaries, I think they can be however long they can be, but sometimes, maybe you need to do a little bit of editing here. But to, there's not really much more to talk about. It really is just an encompassing kind of career look at, David Bowie himself, with a lot of interesting visuals and flourishes. And, it definitely shows that Brett Morgan had this really interesting mindset when he was creating this, that he really studied David Bowie, and the David Bowie estate allowed him to take a lot of behind the scenes footage, which was really cool. There's a lot of footage from his movies in here that they kind of interspersed throughout the entire movie. Overall, it is a really, just kind of, like I said, really cool, really chaotic, really heartfelt, but really passionate look into a man who was just a very creative individual. And on top of everything, like I said earlier, it's one of the most aggressive sound mixes I've ever heard. It's loud. It almost feels like you're at a concert when it's playing, which means it's doing its job, but it uses every speaker pretty well and pretty magnetically, and I thought that was pretty cool. And there are points where it feels like you're at a concert, and like the bass is just going boom, 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 hitting your chest like you would do when you're at a concert. And it's also produced by Live Nation, which is a famous ticketing company, which I don't know how I feel about that. But in the end, if you like David Bowie, this is 100% recommend. This is definitely a passion project for Brett Morgan. It really feels like he took a lot of love and care for it. If you're intrigued by kind of the chaotic nature of who David Bowie was, definitely check it out as well. I think you'll enjoy it. So with that said, that'll be my take on Moonage Daydream. It's not going to be in theaters long, but if you're able to see it, especially in IMAX, definitely check it out. So in the comments below, what is your favorite David Bowie song? What do you think about David Bowie in general? Let me know in the comments. But otherwise, if you like what you see on this channel, awesome. Hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. And if you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.